Then Satan took his seat above the firmament. He commanded the earth to bring forth all living things, animals, trees, herbs, and he pondered on making a man to serve him. He took clay of the earth and made a man like unto himself, and he then bade an angel to enter the body of clay. And the angels grieved deeply that they thus had a mortal form imposed upon them. And Satan bade them to perform the works of the flesh in their bodies of clay, but they didn't know how to commit sin. The originator of sin accomplished his purpose by seduction. This is the world creation according to Cathars, a medieval heresy originating from the 12th century. Quite a different story than the one we know from the Bible, isn't it? Another Cathar writing argues further. We can clearly prove through the Old Testament that the aforesaid Lord and Creator caused the goods of others to be plundered, and even caused most bloody murders. Moses says to his people, If they will not make peace, and shall begin war against thee, thou shalt besiege it, and when the Lord thy God shall deliver it into thy hands, thou shalt slay all that are there with the edge of the sword. And so, in the opinion of the wise, it is quite evident that he cannot be a true creator who, in the temporal world, caused the manifest and merciless destruction of so many men. The heretics postulated two creators. They ascribed the New Testament to the benign God, and the Old Testament to the malign one. The latter book they wholly rejected, except for a few passages. They claimed that the author of the Old Testament was a liar, in that he said to our ancestors, In what day soever thou shalt eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, thou shalt die. But they did not die, as he had said. They also called him a murderer, because he burned the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. A later medieval heresy, Brethren of the Free Spirit, offered a slightly different interpretation. God made all, the good and the evil, the good to show the good will of man, and the evil to show the evil will of man. Thus the good works and the bad ought to please us alike, since they are the works of God, and since it is God who makes everything, not man. God produces everything in everything, therefore the evil things as well as the good things. Therefore whoever understands that God achieves everything in himself cannot sin. A different interpretation, but again quite opposite to the Bible. He maintained first that it was not right to live by the Gospels, and that it was a bad thing to follow them, or likewise any other holy scriptures, that God had given men authority and power to do whatever they wished, and to live in accordance with their desires and pleasures. They did not sin, because God, on his death, had pardoned all and abolished sin. Those who believed otherwise lived according to the devil, and not according to God. Direct continuation of this thought can be found a few centuries later in early socialist writings from the Enlightenment period. In short, all that your theologists and priests preach to you with such eloquence and fervour, all this is in reality nothing but illusion, error, falsehood, fabrication, and deception. These things were first invented by sly and cunning politicians, repeated by impostors and charlatans, then given credence by ignorant and benighted men from the common folk, and finally supported by the power of monarchs. You are told, dear friends, about devils, but no, you have no worse and no more evil enemies than the noble and the rich. So it's two opposing worldviews here, biblical versus heretical, both internally consistent. The first one says that the world, as it's been created, is good and just. The second says that it was created by an evil being. In the Bible, God says, if we don't do what is right, sin is crouching at the door. Second worldview states that sin is merely an invention. The first says that you are responsible for your fate. The second one often lays the blame on the existing order. Communists famously blamed the bourgeoisie for people's misfortunes. Modern bourgeois private property is the final and most complete expression of the system of producing and appropriating products that is based on class antagonisms and the exploitation of the many by the few. A similar sentiment can be found in slightly earlier French socialist writings. People ought to possess all wealth and riches of the earth together and on equal terms. No unhappy people would be seen on earth, whereas at present we come across them on every hand. The abolition of property is not a socialist invention, however. Similar voices were also present in the medieval heresies. They continue to be the true imitators of the apostolic life, not seeking things which are of this world, possessing no house or lands or anything of their own, even as Christ had no property, nor allowed his disciples the right of possession. In the town of Tabor there is nothing which is mine or thine, but all possess everything in common, and no one is to have anything apart. Of course, this all makes perfect sense. If the world is a bad and unjust place, is it not, at least in part, to blame for our misfortunes? And if that's the case, what else to do, if not reforge it into something better, more equitable? The biblical God, on the other hand, says, "Is it not true that if you do what is right, you will be fine?" These opposing worldviews have often clashed throughout history. Sometimes church was the aggressor. Arnauld Amaury, when asked in the middle of the slaughter how the Catholics could be distinguished from the heretics, replied, "Kill them all. God will recognize his own." And this motto has passed into history as the epitome of the spirit which had brought the Crusaders to the south. Other times, the roles would be reversed. The houses of priests and all church property must be demolished, and the churches, altars, and monasteries destroyed. Church bells were taken down and broken to pieces, and then sold away to foreign lands. Church objects, candlesticks, gold and silver, were smashed. Fouché had caused the cross to be demolished in the graveyards, and the statue of Sleep to be substituted in its place. It was decreed to demolish the towers for the reason that their prominence above the other buildings was a violation of the principles of equality. In 1918, in order to speed up the cultural victory of the revolution as well, they began to ransack the churches and throw out the relics of saints, and to carry off church plate. In Smolny they agreed that the church vessels and icon coverings would be melted down into ingots in the presence of the believers. While they were requisitioning the valuables from the church of St. Basil the Great, the icon cover would not fit into a box, and at that point they trampled it with their feet. There's also many other common characteristics of heresies and socialism against the Abrahamic religions, such as looser sexual regulations or lower birth rates. I'll stop right here, though. Please let me know if you found any of that convincing. I'm always looking forward to your comments. And take care.